There are moments in life when everything changes. When the world as you know it splits into before and after. For 11-year-old Lena, that moment came on an ordinary Saturday morning in September when she decided to take a walk through the woods near her home in Freiburg, Germany, just outside the Black Forest. She had walked that path 100 times before. She knew every turn, every fallen log, every clearing where sunlight broke through the canopy. It was her sanctuary, her place to think, to breathe, to escape the noise of the world. But that morning, something felt different. The air was heavier. The birds were quieter. And deep in her chest, Lena felt a pull she couldn't explain. Like something was calling to her. She almost turned back. She almost convinced herself it was nothing. But then she heard it. A sound so low, so broken, that at first she thought she'd imagined it. A growl. No, not a growl. A whimper. The kind of sound that comes from a creature who has given up on being heard. Lena stopped walking. Her hands trembled. Every instinct told her to run home, to find an adult, to stay safe. But something stronger kept her feet planted. Something told her that if she walked away now, she would regret it for the rest of her life. So she followed the sound. She pushed through branches that scratched her arms. She stepped over roots that tried to trip her. She moved deeper into the forest than she'd ever gone before. And then, in a small clearing surrounded by thick undergrowth, she saw him. A lion. A real lion. Lying on his side, barely breathing, with eyes that had almost given up on staying open. His golden fur was matted with dirt and blood. His ribcage rose and fell in shallow, desperate movements. And when he sensed her presence, when he turned his massive head toward this small human girl, Lena saw something in his eyes that broke her heart into 1,000 pieces. He wasn't angry. He wasn't aggressive. He was begging. Begging for someone, anyone, to help him. Begging not to die alone. In that moment, Lena made a choice that would change everything. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She took a step closer. And then another. And another. Until she was kneeling beside an animal that could have killed her with one swipe of his paw, but instead just looked at her like she was the answer to a prayer he didn't know he'd been praying. If you're watching this right now and you can already feel your heart racing, if you need to know what happens next, then stay with me. Because this story goes places you won't believe. And if you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button right now, because we share true stories that remind you what humanity is capable of when we choose courage over fear. Lena's mind was racing. She knew she needed help. She knew she couldn't save this lion by herself. But she also knew something else. She knew that if she left him here, even for a moment, he might not survive. So before she ran for help, she did something that doctors would later call miraculous. She remembered her grandfather. He had been a medic in the army, and he used to tell her stories about survival in the wilderness. About how soldiers would use mud and leaves to pack wounds when they had nothing else. About how nature itself could be medicine if you knew how to use it. Lena had never forgotten those stories. And now, kneeling beside a dying lion in the German forest, those stories came flooding back. She looked at the wound on his side. It was deep, infected, bleeding slowly. Without thinking, without questioning whether it would work, Lena gathered damp leaves from the forest floor. She found moss growing on a nearby rock. She collected small twigs and soft bark. And then, with hands that shook but a heart that was steady, she began pressing the natural materials against the lion's wound. He could have attacked her. He could have seen her as a threat. But he didn't move. He just watched her with those exhausted, grateful eyes. Like he understood. Like he knew she was trying to save him. When she was done, when she had packed the wound as best as she could, Lena placed her hand gently on the lion's head. She whispered to him. She told him she would be back. She told him to hold on. And then she ran. She ran faster than she'd ever run in her life. When she burst through her front door, gasping for air, her mother thought something terrible had happened. And in a way it had. Lena was crying, shouting, pulling her mother's arm, trying to explain that there was a lion in the forest, that he was dying, that they needed to call someone right now. Her mother's first instinct was disbelief. A lion? In Germany? That was impossible. Maybe Lena had seen a large dog. Maybe it was a deer. Maybe her imagination had gotten the better of her. But Lena wouldn't stop. She wouldn't calm down. She looked her mother in the eyes and said, with a certainty that left no room for doubt, "Mom, I'm not confused. I'm not making this up. There is a lion dying in the forest, and if we don't help him right now, he's going to die." Something in her daughter's voice made Lena's mother believe her. She picked up the phone and called the police. The two officers who arrived 15 minutes later were skeptical. They'd gotten strange calls before, but this was a new one. Still, they followed Lena into the forest, more to prove her wrong than because they believed her. Her mother came too, worried, confused, hoping this was all just a misunderstanding. But when they reached the clearing, when they saw what Lena had seen, the world stopped. Because there he was. Exactly where she said he'd be. A fully grown male lion, lying in the undergrowth, barely clinging to life. In the middle of Germany. In a place where lions could never exist. One officer stepped back, his hand moving instinctively to his weapon. The other grabbed his radio and called for backup, his voice shaking. Lena's mother stood frozen, unable to process what she was seeing. And Lena walked forward, slowly, carefully, until she was beside the lion again. He lifted his head just slightly when he saw her. Like he'd been waiting. Like he knew she'd keep her promise. Take a moment and leave a comment right now. Tell me what you would have done in Lena's position. Would you have had the courage to help? Would you have walked away? I want to hear your story. Within an hour, the forest was filled with people. Police, emergency veterinarians, wildlife experts from the Berlin Zoo, journalists, everyone trying to understand the impossible. How did a lion end up in the Black Forest? Where did he come from? And more importantly, how long had he been out here, suffering, waiting to be found? The theories started immediately. Maybe he escaped from a traveling circus. Maybe someone was keeping him illegally as a pet. Maybe this was some kind of elaborate hoax. But none of it made sense. There were no circuses in the area. No reports of missing exotic animals. No logical explanation for how a lion could appear in the German wilderness. While the adults debated and discussed, Lena stayed close to the lion. The officers had asked her to step back, to let the professionals handle it, but she refused. She felt, deep in her bones, that if she left him now, something bad would happen. That her presence was the only thing keeping him holding on. And maybe she was right, because every time someone tried to approach the lion, he would tense up, growl weakly, shift his position defensively. But when Lena spoke to him, when she placed her hand near him, he would relax. His breathing would steady. His eyes would soften. The emergency veterinarian who examined him was stunned. The lion was severely dehydrated, malnourished, and suffering from multiple infected wounds. He should have died days ago. The fact that he was still alive was medically improbable. And then the vet noticed something else. Something that made him call everyone over. The wound on the lion's side, the one that should have been the most dangerous, was covered with a makeshift dressing. Leaves, moss, bark, all pressed tightly against the injury. It wasn't professional. It wasn't sterile. But it had done something crucial. It had slowed the bleeding. It had protected the wound from getting worse. It had bought the lion time. The vet looked at Lena. "Did you do this?" She nodded, embarrassed, worried she'd done something wrong. The vet knelt down to her eye level and said something that made everyone go quiet. "You saved his life. If you hadn't done this, he would have bled out before we got here. You saved him." But the mystery was far from solved. The question remained, where did this lion come from? And the answer, when it finally came, was darker than anyone expected. Interpol was contacted. Border patrol agencies across Europe were alerted. And within 48 hours, the pieces started coming together. 3 days earlier, there had been a traffic accident on a remote road near the Polish-German border. A large transport truck had crashed and overturned. When police arrived at the scene, the driver was gone. He'd fled on foot, abandoning the vehicle. Inside the truck, investigators found something horrifying. Empty cages, chains, blood, evidence of animal trafficking. Someone had been smuggling exotic animals across Europe, and when the accident happened, the cargo escaped. But by the time authorities realized what they were dealing with, There was no trace of any animals. They assumed the creatures had died in the crash or wandered off and succumbed to their injuries. But one hadn't died. One had survived. This lion, this magnificent, broken creature, had escaped from that truck and traveled over 60 kilometers on foot. Injured, starving, lost in a foreign land, he had somehow made it to the Black Forest. And there, in his final moments, he had been found by the one person who refused to look away. When this information was made public, the story exploded. International news outlets covered it. Animal rights organizations praised Lena's bravery. Calls for stricter laws against wildlife trafficking echoed across Europe. And people around the world wanted to know one thing: what would happen to the lion now? The decision was made quickly. He would be taken to the Leipzig Zoo, one of the most respected wildlife facilities in Germany. There, he would receive proper medical care, surgery to repair his wounds, and a safe place to recover. It was the best possible outcome for an animal who should have died alone in a forest far from home. But then came the moment that no one was prepared for. As the veterinary team prepared to sedate the lion for transport, something extraordinary happened. He opened his eyes fully for the first time since they'd arrived. And with a strength that seemed to come from nowhere, he pushed himself up onto his front legs. The crowd gasped. People stepped back. The vets froze, worried he might panic, might lash out. But the lion wasn't looking at them. He was looking at Lena. And he began to move toward her. Each step was slow, painful. His back legs dragged slightly. His breathing was labored. But he kept moving, kept walking, until he was standing right in front of this 11-year-old girl who had refused to let him die. Security moved to intervene, but one of the senior veterinarians held up his hand. Please, just wait. The lion lowered his head. And gently, so gently that it seemed impossible for a creature so powerful, he rested his massive head against Lena's chest. Not aggressive, not threatening, just tired, just grateful. It was a goodbye, a thank you, a moment of connection that transcended species, language, logic. Lena wrapped her arms around his neck. Tears streamed down her face. And for just a few seconds, in that clearing in the forest, a broken lion and a brave girl shared something that words could never capture. Then the lion stepped back. He looked at her one more time. And he lay down, allowing the veterinarians to sedate him, to lift him onto the transport stretcher, to carry him toward the help he so desperately needed. Lena watched him go. Her mother held her tight. And as the vehicle disappeared down the forest road, Lena whispered something that only her mother heard. "He's going to be okay. I know he is." The weeks that followed were filled with updates. The lion, now named Valentine because he had been found through an act of extraordinary courage, underwent multiple surgeries. His wounds were cleaned and stitched. He was given antibiotics, nutrients, around-the-clock care. The veterinarians said it was a miracle he'd survived the journey. That his will to live had been the difference between life and death. But as Valentine's body healed, something else became clear. He wasn't thriving. He ate, but only when forced. He allowed the caretakers to approach him, but he didn't engage. He spent most of his time lying in the corner of his enclosure, staring at the door, as if waiting for something that never came. The zoo tried everything. They enriched his environment with new stimuli. They adjusted his diet. They introduced him to other animals from a safe distance. Nothing worked. Valentine was physically healthy, but emotionally he was shutting down. And the staff didn't know why. The media had been following the story from the beginning. The girl who saved a lion had captured hearts around the world. And when news spread that Valentine wasn't adapting well to his new life, that despite being safe and cared for he seemed to be giving up, people started asking questions. Started demanding answers. One question came up more than any other. Has Lena been to see him? The answer was no. The zoo had policies. Safety protocols. They couldn't just let a child visit a wild lion, no matter the circumstances. But the public pressure grew. Petitions were signed. Animal behaviorists weighed in, suggesting that the bond between Lena and Valentine might be the key to his recovery. And finally, 3 weeks after the rescue, the zoo made an exception. They invited Lena and her mother to Leipzig. The visit would be carefully controlled. Valentine would remain in his enclosure, separated by safety barriers. There would be no direct contact. It would simply be a chance for them to see each other one more time. Nothing more. Lena was terrified. Not of Valentine, but of what this visit might mean. What if he didn't remember her? What if seeing her made things worse? What if she'd built up this connection in her mind, and it wasn't real? But she had to go. She owed him that much. The day arrived. Lena and her mother were escorted through the zoo after closing hours, when the crowds were gone and the animals were settling in for the evening. The staff briefed them on what to expect. Valentine had been lethargic all day. He probably wouldn't react much to their presence. The visit would be brief. They approached his enclosure slowly. Valentine was lying down, facing away from the viewing area. He didn't turn when he heard footsteps. Didn't lift his head. The caretakers exchanged worried glances. But then Lena did something simple. She called his name. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just softly, like she had that day in the forest. Valentine. And everything changed. His ears moved first. Then his head snapped around. His eyes locked onto hers. And in one fluid motion, he leapt to his feet and charged toward the barrier. The caretakers jumped back, startled. Lena's mother grabbed her daughter's arm. But Lena didn't move. She just smiled. Because Valentine wasn't charging in anger. He was running to her. And when he reached the barrier, he did something he hadn't done since arriving at the zoo. He roared. Not a roar of pain or fear or aggression. A roar of pure, unbridled joy. A roar that shook the walls and echoed through the entire building. A roar that said, "You came back. I knew you would." He pressed his entire body against the barrier, trying to get as close to Lena as possible. She placed her hand against the glass, and he pressed his nose to the spot where her hand was, like they were touching through the barrier. And for several minutes, they just stayed like that. A girl and a lion. Connected by something deeper than logic. Connected by the moment when one refused to abandon the other. From that day forward, Valentine transformed. He began eating normally. He started exploring his enclosure. He engaged with his caretakers. He became the lion he was always meant to be. The zoo staff said they'd never seen anything like it. That whatever bond had formed between Lena and Valentine that day in the forest had quite literally saved his life twice. Once physically and once emotionally. Lena couldn't visit every week. She had school, responsibilities, a life to live. But the zoo set up something special. Once a month, they would record videos of Valentine and send them to her. Videos of him playing, running, roaring with strength. And every time Lena watched them, she cried. Not from sadness, but from joy. From knowing that her choice to be brave had mattered. This story isn't just about a girl and a lion. It's about what happens when we choose to act instead of walking away. It's about the power of compassion, even when the situation seems impossible. It's about the fact that sometimes, the smallest among us can make the biggest difference. Valentine lives today in a protected sanctuary. He'll never know the African plains where he should have been born free. He'll never hunt under the open sky. But he's alive. He's safe. And he has a second chance. A second chance that exists because an 11-year-old girl decided that one life was worth fighting for, even when everyone told her it was impossible. If this story moved you, if you felt something real while listening, then share it. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that goodness still exists in this world. That miracles happen when ordinary people choose to be extraordinary. And that every single one of us has the power to change a life, if we're just brave enough to try. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Because we're going to keep telling stories like this. Stories that remind you why humanity, despite everything, is still worth believing in. Stories that prove love is stronger than fear, and courage is stronger than doubt. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for caring. And remember, the world is full of creatures waiting for someone to see them, to help them, to refuse to walk away. Maybe, just maybe, you'll be that person for someone who needs you. See you in the next story.